to admit, when I became a Catholic, I was enamored by St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, and I saw the little flower, St. Thérèse of Lisieux, as sort of a sentimental saint, a holy card saint, until I began to read her writings, and my heart softened and warmed to this beautiful little saint, the saint that I call the little theologian, St. Thérèse of Lisieux. So let's look at her life, the three stages of her life, and then let's look at her contribution to theology and devotion in the 1900s and into the third millennium, St. Thérèse. St. Thérèse was born Marie Françoise Thérèse Martin on the 2nd of January, 1873. She was the youngest of 5 sisters. Her parents are canonized saints now. Her mother, Zélie Martin, and her father, Louis Martin, or Martin. He was a jeweler and a watchmaker. And both parents had sought to enter into the religious life, and both were rejected. Louis was rejected for not knowing enough Latin, and it's not apparent why her mother, Zélie, was rejected. But both sought to be religious and ended up pursuing the vocation of matrimony as, quote unquote, a backup plan. All 5 of their daughters, by the way, ended up becoming nuns, and we'll learn about that in just a little bit. St. Thérèse herself divides her life into 3 periods. In the first period, she identifies from birth to when she was 4.5 years old, and that's when her mother died. Her mother, Zélie, died of breast cancer at the age of 45, and Thérèse was 4 years old. And Thérèse claimed to have clear memories of her mother's illness and death, and she recalls seeing her mother receive the last rites as her father cried at the bedside. So a traumatic memory in the little soul of the little flower. The second period of St. Thérèse's life, she says, was from 4.5 years old, the time when her mother died, until the age of 14, when she discovered her vocation to the religious life. She says that this period, the second period, was the darkest and most painful period of her life. Her older sister, Pauline, became her mama after her mother's death. And in 1882, when she was 9 years old, Pauline, her mama, became a Carmelite nun and left the house. And this was devastating for little Thérèse. And it was like, she said, losing her mother for a second time. And she knew that her Carmelite sister would never be able to return home. So it was for her like a death to the world. At age 9, the same time period, Thérèse began to experience tremors and was diagnosed by the local doctor as experiencing neurotic attacks. And then as she attended school under the Benedictine nuns, she said, quote, "The 5 years I spent at school were the saddest of my life. And if my dear Celine," that's her sister, "had not been with me, I could not have stayed there for a single month without falling ill." And then in 1886, at Christmas, Thérèse experienced a complete conversion, as she called it. After attending midnight mass with her father and sisters, she received what she called her Christmas grace. And that brought her into the third and final period of her life. She explains, having gone to Christmas mass and coming home, her father had remembered that he had to add gifts to her shoes that had been set out for gifts. And she heard her father say, quote, "Thérèse ought to have outgrown all this sort of thing, and I hope this will be the last time." Thérèse writes, "This cut me to the quick, and Celine, who knew how very sensitive I was, whispered to me, 'Don't come down again just yet. You'll only go and cry if you open your presents now in front of Father.' But I was not the same Thérèse anymore. Jesus had changed me completely. I held back my tears, and trying to stop my heart from beating so fast, I ran down into the dining room. I picked up the shoes and unwrapped my presents joyfully, looking all the while as happy as a queen. Father did not look cross anymore now and entered into the fun of it, while Celine thought she must have been dreaming. But this was no dream. Thérèse had gotten back forever the strength of mind that she had lost at 4.5. That glorious night, the third period of my life began, the loveliest of all, and the one in which I receive the most graces. In one moment, Jesus, content and goodwill on my part, accomplished what I have been trying to do for years. End quote. Chapter 5, Story of a Soul. So what was this Christmas grace? It was her realization that her emotions could be controlled. She described it as becoming like a giant, strong and powerful. This goes back to Thomas Aquinas. He teaches that through grace, our intellect becomes strong enough to resist and control our passions, our emotions. This is what Thérèse experienced on that Christmas night. And she explains that her life was filled with calm after this. And she desired in that moment to enter into Carmel by the next Christmas. But she was too young. When she explained her decision to her father, he took a white flower from the earth with its roots still intact to the flower, and he gave it to her, explaining how God makes each flower grow. It's then that she realized that she herself was the little flower in her father's hands, but she was the little flower in God the Father's hands. And so she began to identify herself as the little flower of Jesus, or simply the little flower. In November 1887, she went to Rome with her father, and she met Pope Leo XIII at an audience, and she directly asked the Pope for permission to enter into Carmel at age 15, to which Pope Leo XIII replied, quote, "My child, do what the superiors decide. You will enter if it is God's will." And then he blessed Thérèse, and she refused to leave his feet until the Swiss guards came and carried her out of the room. A touching story. Later that evening, this is kind of cute as well, she wrote to Pauline, her sister, and said, quote, "The Pope is so old that you would think he is dead," end quote. And so at this Advent, this beginning of the third Peter life, from age 14 until her death at 24, she ends up entering the Carmelites at age 15 on April 9th, 1888, as a postulant. And she took the name Saint Thérèse of the Child Jesus and the Holy Face. And she joined her two elder sisters in the cloistered Carmelite convent at Lisieux, which is in Normandy, France. She died of tuberculosis on September 30th, 1897, at the age of 24, having only been a nun for 9 years. And she was canonized shortly after 1925. She's the co-patron of France with Saint Joan of Arc. And in 1997, Pope St. John Paul II declared Saint Thérèse as the 33rd doctor of the Catholic Church, the third female doctor after Catherine of Siena, for whom we have a new St. Thomas Institute lesson, and Teresa of Avila, for whom we also have a new St. Thomas Institute lesson. If you haven't seen those new St. Thomas videos, please check them out. Saint Thérèse wanted to be a great missionary. She wanted to do great things for the Lord, as she read in the lives of the saints. But she was sickly, she was poor, she was a nun in a convent. There was very little heroic deeds that she could accomplish in her context. And so that great desire to do great deeds sort of collapsed in on itself and produced this new spirituality of doing little deeds with great love. And this is the so-called little way of Saint Thérèse. Let's take a look at that. After being a Carmelite for 6 years, she discovered this little way to Jesus, which she found in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 9, verse 4, quote, "Whosoever is a little one, let him come to me." And so she saw that in the book of Proverbs, the way to Jesus is becoming a little one, just as her father had shown her that little flower. She also began to identify Jesus as her third and final mother, as described in Isaiah 66, verses 12 to 13, where God says, "You shall be carried at the breasts, and upon the knees they shall caress you. As one whom the mother caresses, so will I comfort you." When Thérèse read Isaiah 66, she missed her dear mother, who had gone on when she was 4.5 years old. She missed her second mother, Pauline. She had this deep desire for this maternal figure. And then in Isaiah 66, God says that you will be carried at the breast, and upon the knees you shall be caressed, as one whom the mother caresses, so I will comfort you. She realized that everything that she wanted in a mother, she could gain from God. Very profound. And why is she so appealing to so many people? Well, her family problems, her poor health prevented her from doing all these so-called great things. And many of us in our own lives, there's no way that we're going to become a bishop or a cardinal or a great missionary or someone that's teaching on television or on radio. And so when we read the life of Thérèse, we identify with that and we say, there are little things that I can do. The way that I cook dinner for my family, or the way that I take out the trash, I do that for Jesus. Or the way that I care for my children, or the way that I complete my accounting project, or the way I do my schoolwork. All these little hidden things can be done to the glory of Jesus. And that is a means of sanctity. It's a means of salvation. It's the means of becoming a great saint. And how do we know? Because Saint Thérèse already walked that path and proved that it could be done. One of the anecdotes from Saint Thérèse that I just love is her reflection on an elevator to heaven. First of all, it's interesting to have these modern saints who on holy cards are actually photographed. They're not, Byzantine icons or paintings, which are all beautiful. But beginning in the 1900s, we start having photographs of these great saints. And they're also talking about spirituality in modern terms. And Thérèse looks at rich people and realizes rich people don't take the stairs, they take the elevator. And she, because she was weak and small, knew she could not climb the stairs to heaven. So she began to ask God, well, what's the elevator that will take me directly to heaven? She says this, quote, "We live in the age of inventions now, and the wealthy no longer have to take the trouble to climb the stairs. They take an elevator. This is what I must find, an elevator to take me straight up to Jesus, because I am too little to climb the steep stairway of perfection. So I searched the scriptures for some hint of my desired elevator until I came upon these words from the lips of eternal wisdom. Whoever is a little one, let him come to me." We saw that was from Proverbs 9:4. And then Thérèse goes on to say, what is that elevator? She says, your arms, my Jesus, are the elevator, which will take me up to heaven. There is no need for me to grow up. On the contrary, I must stay little and become more and more so, end quote. That's it. That's Saint Thérèse. We must become little. There's so much humility in this message. There's a profound spirituality. And for any of us who study the great theologians like Thomas Aquinas or Bonaventure or Augustine or Saint Hildegard, Saint Teresa, for any of us to disregard this message shows an immaturity in our own spirituality. We must always be seeking to become little. We must always be asking, what is the elevator to you, Lord? We shouldn't have the pride to think we're strong enough to climb the mountain to heaven. But instead, what's the elevator? It's the arms of Jesus lifting us up. Saint Thérèse, pray for us.